A serial sexual predator.
Everything was just being thorough.
His abuse an open secret for decades.
They all knew.
At Ohio's largest university.
This is a systemic problem for Ohio citizens.
The idea that I wouldn't stand up for our athletes if I thought there was some kind of harm happening to them is ridiculous. I've stood up to the FBI, I've stood up to the IRS, I've stood up to Adam Schiff, I've stood up to John Boehner, the Speaker of the House from our own state and our own party.
I had a teammate, George Pardos, I called and told him, call Jim Jordan and tell him to quit calling me or I'm going to beat his ass.
Between two conflicting estimates, somebody is lying.
James Daniel Jordan was born in 1964, about 50 miles west of Columbus, deep in the Democratic stronghold of Champaign County, Ohio. In high school, Jordan was a 4-time state champion wrestler. He continued tapping people out at the University of Wisconsin, where he won 2 NCAA Division I wrestling titles in the lightweight class.
Actually, I'm not a lawyer. I have a law degree, never did take the bar exam.
In 1987, Jordan became an assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State University, where he'd work until 1995. About 200 of the school's alums are suing the university, alleging sports doctor Richard Strauss sexually abused them. 9 of Jim Jordan's former wrestlers came forward to say that Jordan knew of the sexual abuse and did nothing to stop it. The stories, which are hard to listen to, paint a picture of Jordan's complicity during this time. In just one instance, a referee reported an incident to Jordan in 1994 in which Strauss masturbated in front of him in the shower after a match. In response, Jordan, at the time, reportedly said, "Yeah, that's Strauss."
By Dr. Richard Strauss. Live on your side, investigator Sarah Butterson shares their story.
It was 1992, and Will Knight was proud.
It meant the world to me at that time.
After grueling tryouts, he walked on to Ohio State's wrestling team.
I was like, I'm on this team, I'm not going anywhere.
But the privilege came with a price. Each fall required a physical with team doctor Richard Strauss.
And he gives you an elaborate groin, physical.
He understood why teammates warned him.
Everyone's like, all right. And then you just try and play it off. Well, it's your turn.
Dr. Strauss had a lot of power.
Strauss decided if you were fit to compete, which meant a full exam for even minor injuries.
If you didn't, you weren't cleared. And if you weren't cleared, you weren't competing.
Rocky Ratliff is Will's attorney.
He's telling you things to make it okay to do things to you.
And fellow survivor.
He's touching you, and you can feel his breath on you.
And he was everywhere. In locker rooms, showers, and the sauna, watching, naked, often visibly aroused.
He would come and watch, at the time our guys showered a lot. I said, Doc, you make the guys nervous that you shower with them. And his response was, Coach, you shower with you guys all the time. I said, yeah, not for an hour, Doc.
Ohio State has since received reports that Strauss abused athletes in 14 sports, the university said. University officials are not speaking about the investigation until it is complete. Although he was not mentioned or referenced in the video, it led to questions last week about Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, a former OSU wrestling coach.
Abuse. And one of the referees said he personally told you that. Yeah. Has any of that refreshed your memory about what was going on with Dr. Strauss while you were there?
Look, every single coach has said the same thing I've said. All kinds of athletes have said the same thing I've said, and the reason they've said that is because it's the truth. The idea that I wouldn't stand up for our athletes if I thought there was some kind of harm happening to them is ridiculous.
Congressman Jim Jordan says he knew nothing and saw nothing during his time as an assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State. But more than 300 students and student athletes have come forward to claim they were groped, molested, even raped by Dr. Strauss. And this independent report, paid for by OSU, says physicians, athletic directors, and yes, at least 22 coaches did know.
But like I said, every single coach has said the same thing I have, because the reason they've said that is just because that's the truth.
Well, the fencing coach didn't say that. In fact, she wouldn't let her athletes go to him anymore, Coach Remenek. She said that all the coaches were aware, and I've talked to other coaches who were there at the time, and athletes like Dan Ritchie says Dr. Strauss had a locker 2 down from yours. How were you not aware that he was in there taking a shower every day? and pleasuring himself in front of these students when they all knew about it.
Well, I mean, look, if someone would have reported some kind of abuse to me, if I'd have known about it, I would have reported it. I would have taken on anyone. I would have defended our athletes, and just like I defend the taxpayers when the IRS targeted taxpayers, just like I've stood up to all kinds of folks in Washington, I would have done it, but no one reported anything, and then we never heard of any type of abuse.
And you didn't see anything?
That's why I did not, and that's why every single coach and all kinds of athletes have said the same thing I have.
And Jordan insists the two people who claim in court documents that they discussed Dr. Strauss abusing students with him are lying.
The two individuals who said that, one has spent years in prison for fraud, and the other one was this referee who I think is completely lying about what he said. It never happened.
Senior level leadership at the Ohio State University knowingly and intentionally failed to provide a safe environment for children, our children. I was assaulted by Dr. Richard Strauss for the first time as a 14-year-old freshman at Bishop Reed High School on the west side.
I don't go to doctors.
Rocky quit school.
I don't go to the locker rooms.
Only in 2018, when former wrestler Mike DiSabato blew the whistle and Ohio State investigated, did they realize how many young men were hurt. During Strauss's nearly 20-year tenure, OSU says he committed at least 1,500 sexual assaults. But when it came time to seek justice, Ohio, once again, looked the other way.
It has been cruel to the victims.
Marcy Hamilton is the founder and CEO of Child USA, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting children and preventing abuse.
And Ohio continues to be one of the worst states in the country.
Jordan says he had no knowledge of any abuse or complaints from athletes.
I stood up to the Speaker of the House from my home state, stood up to the IRS, and have stood up to the FBI. To think that I would not stand up for my athletes is ridiculous. Thank you.
I went inside, the health center and was waiting in line, and there he was.
Dr. Richard Strauss, the doctor on duty.
He was always too hands-on with athletes. I told him one time, I said, Doc, you're much too hands-on. He just said, I'm being thorough.
He said, I'll give you a shot here and I'll give you a shot when you get home. And I said, I'm good. You can, just give me the shot here and give me a double dose. And the whole idea was to make my body loose so that this spasm I was having in my throat would go away. That was the diagnosis, and that made sense to me.
But the shot made him more than loose. He was groggy, feeling drugged. The doctor insisted he had to take him home and give him a second shot. Nowakowski had roommates at the house who realized he seemed doped up.
Everyone knew him, right? So it wasn't a big deal. Doctors, making sure that I'm okay, and which was great. And when I got into my room, I was pretty out of it. But then he gave me another injection, and I was really out of it. And I was, he gave me the injection, and I remember thanking him for it, like, thank you for taking care of me. And then I couldn't really move. I was laying there, and the next thing, he was cuddling next to me, which I thought was just more than odd. And then that's kind of the last thing I remember till I woke up in the morning. Blood on the sheets, Colleen. There was sperm over my...
More than 400 former male athletes have sued. Ohio State filed a motion to have their cases thrown out.
It's been pending for years. Could be thrown out any day.
The reason? Ohio's statute of limitations. An arbitrary rule, a sexual abuse claim must be filed within 2 years.
It's clear that they don't care about us as much as we care about them.
A judge sent the cases to mediation. Ohio State settled with 185 victims for an average of $252,000. A fraction of what Michigan State paid female gymnasts abused by Dr. Larry Nassar, and USC paid alleged victims of gynecologist George Tyndall.
And it hurts. It really does.
At first, it seemed Ohio lawmakers would help. A proposal was introduced to create what's known as a revival window, just for Strauss victims, to give them a period of time to file claims against OSU. But there was never even a committee vote, and there are no plans to reintroduce the bill.
It's critically important that this window opens so you can learn what really did happen in your own state.
Again, compare that to Michigan. It created a revival window for Dr. Nassar's victims. 21 other states have done even more, opening revival windows for expired child sex abuse claims, and in New Jersey, adult victims too.
Lawmakers in Ohio are choosing to help with the cover-up rather than protect the children of Ohio.
They're still benefiting off the sweat and tears of all of our teammates.
Will hasn't settled his case, but not because of money.
So how am I going to do that as a coach?
In charge of wrestling at his alma mater, Shaker Heights High School.
This is a huge narrative in my life and a lot of people's lives.
He's unwilling to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
And if I can't use this to help change anything, I'm not going to settle with them.
I now recognize the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Olson, welcome. In America, we shouldn't need to say that parents speaking out about their children's education aren't domestic terrorists, or that those raising concerns about the radical direction the left is trying to take this country are not domestic terrorists, or that Trump supporters aren't domestic terrorists, but apparently we do, because the Biden administration is bound and determined to demonize anyone and everyone not in lockstep with their far-left agenda.
Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling on the 4th of July, begging me to go against my brother. Begging me. Crying for a half hour. That's the kind of cover-ups that's going on there. Jim Jordan called me several times after that. That week, I had to have my lawyer call him, tell him to stop calling me. I had a teammate, George Pardos, I called and told him, call Jim Jordan and tell him to quit calling me or I'm going to beat his ass. He's throwing us under the bus, all of us. He's a coward. He's a coward. He's not a leader. He's a coward. I'm a leader. I was captain of these guys. That's why I'm here. I would never abandon my team. He abandoned us. Our head coach abandoned us. He's flipped his story. He called other people to flip their story. He called Mark Coleman to flip his story. He called his parents, 90 years old. That's the kind of person Jim Jordan is.